I come from a family of, computer science and other kinds of hard science people who would reject anything spiritual or possibly woo-woo as being for stupid people. I only started opening my mind to it because nothing that was supposed to work would make me better. Like I tried all this stuff. And then I ended up going to this transpersonal psychology, personal development workshop that just ripped my head open. I was doing holotropic breath work, which is like as strong as taking LSD without any psychedelics. And actually had a flashback that I couldn't even process as being a past life. And I, since then, without psychedelics or sometimes with, I have experienced lots of things that you could interpret as being a past life experience.
Hey there, welcome to the Recharge Biomedical Podcast. I'm Dr. Edward Park, and if you're curious about regenerative medicine, you've come to the right place. We're diving into the latest breakthroughs in telomerase activation, stem cell exosomes, and all the cutting-edge science that's shaping the future of healing and longevity. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to another episode of the Recharge Biomedical Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ed Park, and today we're very lucky to be with Dave Asprey. Hey, Dave.
I really appreciate getting a chance to chat again.
Yeah, it's always fun. I know you don't like to watch your old ones, but I went back finally and watched our podcast. It was pretty hilarious. We got into some pretty strange and interesting and fascinating things. And I think that's what I want to talk about more than anything is your new book coming out, Heavily Meditated. It's really a beautiful mix of your personal story and how I think more of a gift to people, how they can kind of emerge. And I think out of all the things we see now that biohacking is such a huge thing, everyone's coming to the space and they're finally realizing that, hey, your doctor might have gotten, 90 minutes of nutrition. He doesn't know what to eat, so you've kind of been out there in the wilderness, taking the flak and pioneering a lot of this. So kudos to you.
Thank you. This felt like a book that needed to happen. It's not like any meditation book that's out there. In fact, the guy who co-authors the Dalai Lama's books and has been his best friend for 50 years just sat for a summary of the main points in Heavily Meditated. And afterwards, he went on stage and said, all this stuff the Dalai Lama's been saying for this last 50 years makes a lot more sense with this framework from the book. So that was amazing and unexpected high praise. The deal is there's so much written about meditation, hundreds of thousands of books going back thousands of years. This is a book that has things in it that have not been written before. And it includes things like hurry, meditate faster.
Yeah.
The reality is I don't have time to spend 4 hours a day in a cave. And I will do it if I have to double my lifespan or become enlightened or something. Even then, not a lot of people would. So maybe there's ways to enter specific altered states that work with meditation or work better than meditation.
Absolutely.
And healing is an altered state. Becoming untriggerable is an altered state. Living longer because you've turned off your stress is an altered state. And intuition and focus and flow state, all of these, there's a recipe for how to get to them. And meditation is sometimes an ingredient, but not always. This is the recipe book.
I love it. And I think you have a real gift. And I'm saying this because I've written a couple of books. I know you've written, this is like your 6th or 7th now. And to translate something to an audience that doesn't know the jargon or the scientific background and to really explain it in a way that's accessible is quite a gift. So just for those that don't know, I was the book launches May 20th, but I read it twice and it covers a lot of really deeply granular technical aspects of consciousness, the brain waves, but then it goes into different forms of entheogens or dissociative hallucinogenic drugs. But the whole tone and the through line is just like, you're a person, I'm a person. We all have struggles, but it can definitely get better. And here's how. It's very much of a practical explanation.
It's practical. And look, I talk about psychedelics. It's one of the chapters. They're a way to enter an altered state. I talk about Tantra and conscious kink. 20% of people report meeting God during orgasm at least once in their life. So why are those kinds of sacred connection practices not in the same conversation as psychedelics and breath work? Because they should be, right? And they're honestly no different than prayer if you do them with intention. Right.
So interesting. My first guest was a psychedelic therapist, right? And so you're my 6th guest, I think. So it's a new podcast, but I think you're exactly right. The reason I didn't do, you did the nasal twice now. I don't know how that affected you. And so we'll talk about the exosomes that you did in Costa Rica, which I am too scared to try, but I'm really interested to know your experience. But the first treatment I did was a nasal exosome, and it caused me to have voluntary piloerection. So I was like, oh, this isn't good. This is like permanent neurological change. So I finally did it to help some lady try and get over her phobia. So I did it, and it really took me up a level. But I thought naively, and I like your feedback, that more brain power would be more anxiety and depression. But on the contrary, it actually gave me more computing power to ignore the stuff that was triggering me. So I thought more thinking, more time in the future and the past, right? Let's be present. But that was my intention. And like you said, it's all about intention.
There are multiple studies showing that the prefrontal cortex is the most energy demanding part of the brain. And it's the part of your brain that you use for willpower that overcomes your impulses. So having better mitochondrial function because of exosomes, assuming they can get into your brain, it's a reason that it would become easier. But there are other altered states that you can pursue if you have enough energy that can make a big difference.
Oh yeah, just breathing. Like I know you have a sponsor at your conference, but I tried a lesser knockoff version of his Neurovisor, and I chose microdose, and for 11 minutes I was completely dissociated. You could have told me to go into the Ambassador Hotel and shoot a presidential candidate. I would have done it. Like, so yeah, eye stuff. I know you talked about doing EMD, eye movement stuff. There's many ways to get into an altered state, but let's talk about the default state or the default mode network.
Sure.
Because, a lot of people don't know what that is. I went to another lecture and the guy was like, that's you, your personality, the software that you identify with that you choose to load every day. But even that can be upgraded in terms of like firmware. I know you come from a tech background, and so it's funny. I wrote a book, and it's kind of rhymes with your book, and I talk about consciousness as software.
Right.
Like people wake up in the morning, and I would say the majority of humanity in the Western world lives a life kind of in the prison of their personality and their ego. So it's so refreshing to have you talk about techniques of breathing, of meditation. And so you lived it, actually. You had a very active, what you would call neuroatypical, neurodivergent mind. And there are a lot of people I know in my family with this, but somehow you managed to find a way to use all that power, upgrade it, and not go nuts. Because a lot of people end up Ted Kaczynski style, right?
Yeah, the first part of the book, I talk about some of my own story there, in part because a lot of people think that the brain is somehow locked in, or that if you have Asperger's or autism or ADHD or any of that stuff, you just have it and that it's incurable or you can't change it. Dude, you can change a lot of things about the brain that people don't think you can. And there's a framework for understanding this that it's profound, and it's the most important thing that's emerged from creating and leading the biohacking movement for all this time. And it's that at the beginning of this whole process, you have some amount of available energy. If your mitochondria are working, because maybe you did some stem cells or telomeres or longer, all kinds of good stuff going on.
Right.
But okay, you have more or less energy. Okay, that's the input. And then the operating system of the body, I didn't say of the mind, of the body, it runs a very specific set of decisions. And it does this before you can think all of the time. So as a third of a second, it's the basically it's called the P300D, but it's the censorship window where your body gets to take its time to decide how it's going to make you feel and perceive things, right? So are you going to see the shadow as a threat, or are you going to ignore it? Well, the body needs a little bit of time to decide that. And it's not going to show you the shadow. You won't even know it's there, unless it decides it's worth noticing, and then it's going to flag it for you, but it needed time. So what's running the operating system in the body? It's your mitochondria. They're distributed consciousness that controls your meat in real time, and you get a story from them a third of a second later. And the third of a second is very eminently measurable in neuroscience. And a lot of people say, Dave, I don't believe you. Okay. You ever lean on a hot stove and then go, it's pretty hot. I'm getting burned. I should move my hand. No one's ever done that.
No.
Magically, your hand jerks itself away, and then, without even thinking about it, you say, good thing I moved my hand. You didn't move your hand. A mysterious personality living inside your meat alongside you moved your hand and made you think you did it.
That's hilarious. Well, but would you agree with me in my statement that I, as a person, like when I used to look at the mirror or the looking glass, had a bunch of different negative thoughts or whatever, and through a Kundalini awakening that my shaman friend did, that kind of got purged. I mean, it's a cycle. You repeat. But would you agree that a lot of people don't even know that there is a default mode network in their ego construct and that they
Oh,
just think,
yeah.
they're just like a non-player character. What do you think about that?
Most people wouldn't be aware of it because that's what's called default mode network. And when it's turned down but not off, you're in active mode. So you're really focusing on something, the default mode kind of goes away and you stop focusing, and all the mean critical voices and thoughts come up in your head, and all the fears and all of those things emerge from what I write about in Heavily Meditated.
Mhm.
And it's okay, you got some amount of energy, and where's it going to go first? And these are all F words. It makes it really easy to understand. The first F word is fear. So if something is scary, run away from, kill, or hide from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Those voices in your head, when you're not focusing on anything, they've identified criticism or whatever your story is as a threat, and they're going to make you pay attention to that as soon as you're not paying attention to something actively. So your default mode becomes criticism, shame, but it's all around fear.
Mm.
So if your operating system determines there isn't something that's fearful, it's already used a bunch of energy on maybe things that are phantom fearful, but whatever energy is left goes to the next step. Food. A third of your thoughts every day are about tacos or something similar, if you're an average human.
Right.
Neuroscience studies prove this. So you can learn intermittent fasting and just not think about food. It frees up a third of your thoughts. And this makes sense because if you're a bacteria or a tree or a person, it doesn't matter, a jellyfish, if something's scary, you got to do something about it, and you got to make sure you eat. So
Right.
of course your body's going to make sure you do that, even if you're not in there. So fear food, third F word, you got to do it to stay alive for multiple generations.
Yeah, we got that one.
What are you thinking?
Yeah. Fire truck? That one?
Oh, I was thinking fertility, but
Oh,
I didn't
okay,
realize
all
you were
right.
so
My
crass.
bad. My bad.
Dr. Park.
Yes.
Whoa, oh my gosh. No, I'm just messing with you. Yeah, fear food, the other F word. Okay, so all life has to reproduce. And everyone has been on a date that you probably shouldn't have gone on, but there was some magical force in you that made you go on that date. The
Yeah.
same magical force that made you eat all the Ben and Jerry's,
Yeah.
and the same magical force that made you shy away from an opportunity. They're all F words, they're all mitochondria, and they're all processing reality before you get to and making you feel a certain way about it.
Yeah.
They make mountains look taller than they are. They make ice cream look better tasting than it is. All of it. So is there anything you've ever done that you're ashamed of that isn't one of those three F words?
Probably, yeah. So, yeah.
I don't think so. No one I've ever met has been able to name something.
Probably thinking I was better at trading stock options than I really was because of some lucky strikes. That probably messed me up.
That's a
But-
combination of food and fear.
No, I do.
Right.
I definitely appreciate your point. But
Yeah.
I think that the human experience is really what you're talking about in this wonderful book. And you break it down in such a great way. You give like at least 7 or 8 different ways of breathing to access this. So you've kind
Yeah.
of taken all these great traditions of yoga in the broadest definition and saying, here's what you do if you're feeling this way, which I love. And that alone is worth the price of admission. But the one quote that stuck with me was like, people used to ask you to help fix their brains and make them smarter, but really what they wanted was to be more peaceful. Talk about that.
Well, if you look at the opposite of fear, what is it? It's peace. It's not love. It's not safety. It's not safety and trust and all that good stuff can emerge out of peace. But if you're not feeling safe, nothing else works. So if you want to step out of fear, you step into a sense of inner peace, and inner safety is an aspect of that where like, I've got this.
Yeah.
And then you turn hunger into nourishment, and you turn lust into a sacred connection or a divine union with others. And now all of a sudden, these things that are sucking huge amounts of energy, they just go away. And all the energy flows through the next F word, which is friend. We're wired, like all life forms, to support our own life form in tribes and whatever, and the world around us. We form ecosystems like everything else by design. And it's not because of our brains. It's because of our subcellular biology.
Yeah.
So you're wired to be kind to others. And once that happens, your community starts nourishing you the way it's supposed to because you nourish it. And wow, there's so much energy left for the final F word, which is forgiveness. And forgiveness is not about telling anything that what they did was okay. And it's not about telling them that you forgive them. Forgiveness is an altered state. It's a feeling inside the body, not even really inside the mind. And it's the same thing you do when you pick up your phone, you go into settings and you turn off alerts for all the apps.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is turning off all of the alerts from your nervous system that are not appropriate for the world you live in.
Yeah.
And when you do that, oh my God, whatever energy you can make, you don't waste it on fear, you don't waste it on hunger, you don't waste it on loneliness. It just goes into service to others, which returns more energy, and then into evolving yourself.
I love
And
that.
it sets up this beautiful loop. That's why I wrote Heavily Meditated. It's taken me like millions of dollars to reverse my age, and God knows, tens of millions of dollars on 40 years of Zen on measuring brain waves and figuring all this stuff out.
Yeah.
This is how it actually works. This is how reality processing works. This is where your ego comes from. It's your stupid mitochondria. Thank God they're fast and that they're hyper-connected and all that, but
Yeah.
they're still stupid. You can train them like you train a dog. You can
Well,
have
that's
a
so
service dog.
interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of
Yeah.
people are into the mitochondrial health, and I know that sometimes I see patients with Dr. Jordan who mapped out your brain and
Mhm.
heated up your hypothalamus like a gas station burrito so that you could have better penetration of your blood-brain barrier. And did you notice that your consciousness was more?
He didn't use the burrito thing. He had the hot dog roller. He had me lay on the thing and it rolled me up and down to heat up my brain.
I don't know that one.
No, I'm just kidding. I like the gas station burrito.
But
So,
like, for example, my dreaming changed when I did the second
Yeah.
out of third. The third time I did it was because of brain damage from a fire, but that's another story. But the second time I did it, 5 weeks out, my dream states changed. And it's not
Mhm.
lucid dreaming. It's actually in the dream, I became totally conscious of all my thoughts and
Yeah.
decisions and thinking. It was immersive. So have you noticed any change in your qualitative state of consciousness?
oh yeah. So number one, I've been studying the qualitative state of consciousness for 20 years or something. So I'm really finely attuned to subtle shifts in my cognition because my brain was so broken. It's not like I'm, holier than thou. Literally, I had such bad brain dysfunction that I became a little obsessive compulsive about it. And I got over that finally, but the awareness remains. So I will feel subtle shifts. When I did this down at RMI, Dr. Shelley Jordan's thing where they open up the blood-brain barrier and introduce stem cells and exosomes into the brain. I described it as shifting to 4K. Anyone who remembers the first time they got a 4K TV, you're like, whoa, that's how I'm going to call it energetic or spiritual perception of the world shifted. My vision, it was good before, good now. But there was a shift in my awareness that was already pretty good. I mean, I could do energy work on people, and like I do very deep healing work with people at 40 years of Zen. My sense of that and the level of clarity really went up, but it could have been placebo. So one of the things I do, I work with people who are highly perceptive and have been doing this kind of work for a long time. So, and I never believe them either. I always have two of them that don't know each other. So I can compare if they both say the same thing and haven't been programmed to say it. That's interesting. And the main people I work with on just personal development stuff, they just took a look at me and were like, what did you do? Like your energy doesn't read like it did before. You don't look like you're 50, like with their eyes closed. They say that. So again, that's very esoteric stuff, but these are people who know your energy, and the change of state is profound. And it's because you're recharging and making the part of the brain, the mitochondria, making them younger, which makes the central timing clock work better and
So
makes it
interesting.
younger.
Yeah, no, I had patients come and tell me, oh, they measured my mitochondrial function indirectly through glutathione measurement. But I guess they're really trying to figure out what parts of your brain are less metabolically active, and then hopefully with the regenerative medicine coax it back to life, That's good. So you, like I, experienced some improvement in your, processing, I guess.
It wasn't just processing and cognition. In fact, I would say it was as much that as it was awareness. So there's, and I share kind of the steps of this because the advanced layers of training at 40 years of Zen involve training intuition, not just running the reset process or making something faster. And what that means is intuition is the first thing you experience, and you experience it, it's very small and very fast. And right after it comes an emotion that's usually based on an old trigger that you could reset. And then after that is a thought. And either the emotion or the thought will almost always tell you to ignore or crush or think something other than your intuition. So if you can just have the peace of mind to catch the very first subtle thing, that's intuition. And that can guide you so well. And my increase in intuition was really dramatic
Wow.
from doing this, on par with what happens when people do 40 years of Zen. And I've
Yeah.
spent 6 months of my life
So for
doing
people
that.
that don't know, you developed this program for people that can get trained, and it's a
Mhm.
lot of the techniques in practice. So it's like a training ground for people who want to.
Yeah, 40 Years of Zen is a neuroscience company in Seattle. I started it 10 years ago, and I can write heavily meditated because I've looked at more than 1,000 people's brains using clinical grade neuroscience gear while teaching them meditation techniques to go in and turn off reactive patterns to reality that don't serve them. So there's God knows how many books on meditation, and some of them are fantastic. Heavily meditated as well. This is science informed, and this is people spend $20,000 to spend 5 days with my team of neuroscientists and facilitators, all this kind of stuff. Or you can read the book, and I'll teach you the exact same process. I think it works better with a computer hooked up to your head, but you don't have to.
In my first nonfiction book, one of the chapter quotes was, "Intuition is the royal road to wisdom," and I think that's true. It's your gut feeling, but it's integration of all the chakras, if you will, right? You're using all the senses. So
Yeah.
let's talk about a couple of months ago. We were at A360, right? And even before I knew about telomeres, we met. I don't know if you were at Silicon Valley. Was it Smart Life?
Yeah, I was the president. and
Yeah,
chairman.
yeah. I think I came in before you were the president. They asked me to do a lecture like 15, 16 years ago. And then at that time, what was your weight like? Were you heavy or you were already thin by then?
If it was 15 or 16 years ago, I would have already moved away.
Yeah.
I was there in like 1999 or 98 through the early aughts.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so I gave a lecture on the TA65,
Cool.
and you started taking the TA65 for a little bit, and then did
Oh, yeah.
cycloestradiol. Yeah. Did that seem to help you in the early days?
I couldn't tell, to be honest. And to be truthful, I wasn't taking the TA65 branded stuff because I couldn't afford it back then. This is before I started Bulletproof and all.
No, I know.
And it was just a little outside my budget, but I did
Yeah.
take some cycloestradiol. I took
I
a relatively
remember
high dose
asking
for a
about
couple
that at David Avocado Wolf's thing. I remember you flew in on 3 hours of sleep and we gave a very breathy lecture to a room full of vegans how beef is the most eco-friendly food substance. I thought it was hilarious.
Do you know what
But at
happened?
that time you said, yeah, I just stopped taking this cycloestradiol that you were taking. So, yeah.
Here's the funny thing. I walked in and I said, guys, I'm a lacto, ovo, beefo, porco vegetarian. Hope we can be friends. And then I came back the next year and 2/3 of the room was no longer vegan because they were all eating ghee because I taught them that ghee was good for
Well,
them.
it's kind of funny, the power that you have, and it's really an awesome thing that, you're kind of fearless in that regard. Like the other patient I treated at Abundance was my friend who also went out about 15, 16 years ago on his own. And now he's built this huge empire. And like you, he'll get up in front of 5,000 people and just love it and enjoy it, get energy. But most people from the exosomes get a little bit sleepy, but I know you guys get kind of activated, which I think is really interesting. Have you ever done your MBTI, or do you know what it tends to?
It was ENTF or P. I was running the line between F and P, if I remember right.
Yeah, okay. Oh, ENTP. Okay, all right. Well, you have to be careful when you're a prophet. You have a lot of people just listen to you. They'll just take your advice.
I have a solution for that because I don't want to be a guru like that. I would like people to do the learning so they can personalize it. So every now and then I throw in complete BS just to make sure they're doing it. I've done this as a parent with my kids. And when I was at the biohacking conference a couple of years ago, I'm like, all right, everyone, let's do a meditation. Take a deep breath, Now repeat after me. I am enough. Right. And everyone does it. And then I have the sound guy do like a scratching sound, like, and I go, actually, F that. You could ask for anything you want and you just wanted to be enough. Why would you let me do that to you? Like, how about more than enough? So I have a little extra to share.
Yeah.
And people just like, oh my God, he's got a point there. But right. They all did it. And like, I would just say, how dare you ask just to be enough?
Yeah.
Like, what a victim mindset are you stuck in? Get over it. Like, ask to be abundantly powerful and at one with the universe so you could do the most good. Like, wouldn't that be, if you're going to ask and you believe you're going to get what you ask, I just want to be enough. Dude, no, I've had chronic fatigue. I've been wrecked beyond belief.
We age because our telomeres shorten and our stem cells deplete. But what if we could support both? I've been taking TA65 for 17 years. It's the only supplement I trust to support better mood, better sleep, and exercise recovery. And at age 57, I don't have any gray hair and I don't need reading glasses. TA65 is available now. Go to rechargebiomedical.com/TA-65 and enter promo code RECHARGE10 to save 10% off.
Yeah, just asking to be well. That's a sense
Well,
of
sometimes,
hopelessness.
it's a learned helplessness thing. Like you
Yeah.
adjust your expectations down. But I
Mhm.
think wanting to feel like you're enough, it's so funny. Going to the abundance thing is very expensive to go, and you've been many years in a row. But I
Yeah.
felt like as a newcomer to that environment, like they couldn't really even see the water that they were swimming in. And the irony of the Abundance Festival is that people are very obsessed with money and power,
Mhm.
which is fine in and of itself. But there was this sense like, who's gonna, you know, be the next unicorn, the next $1 billion, 9-figure, blah, blah, blah. And the funniest part of it, which I thought was hugely ironic, was Travis Kaselnik, I guess one of the founders of Uber. And he was talking about the fact that money doesn't make you happy alone. I'm like, I think we all knew that, but having
Travis
you say
would-
that
he
doesn't
would
really
know.
it's just so funny.
I used to work with Travis in the company he had before he started Uber.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him working on the happiness thing because I was too in Silicon Valley. I mean, part of the reason I wrote Heavily Meditated too, I made $6 million when I was 26 years old. Right. And then I lost it when I was 28. But when I had it, I looked at a friend. I'm like, I'll be happy when I have 10. Like, what a
Right.
douchebag. Right. And then I tried getting married in my 20s. I have my picture in Entrepreneur Magazine. I'm 23 years old and the first guy to sell anything over the internet. Literally the first product ever sold
Was the
before the
caffeine
browser.
shirts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, okay, and I'm going to be happy. Like, I'm in 80 different magazines right now. No, I'm like, nothing works. And that was one of the reasons I started looking at consciousness as well as health. I'm like, I got to dig myself out of this broken body with arthritis and chronic
Right.
fatigue and obesity and all that. And I don't want to be miserable all the time. And what I find is biohacking, I built it to make longevity cool because the things that make old people young make young people powerful. So it's relevant for all of us if we talk about it in the right language. So it's got longevity, but anytime you start biohacking, you'll get energy back and you're going to want to live longer. And then you're going to say, oh, I'd like to be conscious so I can learn how to be happy and present. So you have to do consciousness and longevity if you're a biohacker. That's really what it's all about. And so this is Heavily Meditated, just to kind of tie that up in a bow so that we really have the tools available.
Well, I think it's really something we touched upon on our podcast is that there is this sort of idea of victim consciousness as being empowering.
Yeah.
It's like the Stephen Schwartz musical Wicked. It's like the Elphaba. She doesn't have to be green and have that nose. She chooses to because that's where she feels powerful and focused.
Yes.
So, but I think that the greatest gift of the book also is when you say, you forgive, the last F or the fourth F, the penultimate one is you forgive and you take whatever the curse is, the lead that's weighing you down, and you turn it into gold. And I thought that was really important for people to realize because in a fractal sort of way, we're all going on a little hero's journey, taming our demons.
Yeah.
But as a result of some weird, neuroatypicality that you have a very promiscuous mind. So you're able to try many, many different things and see what works and make a living out of disseminating that. But
Did you just call me a mental slut?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow, you're
No,
spicy
that's
today.
the highest praise. Mentally promiscuous is the highest praise. But we talked a little bit about past lives. And I'll tell you, until last year, I didn't believe in past lives. But I met this physician who told me about 3 of his very vivid past lives. And he talked a little bit about the smell of DMT. And I was like, oh, okay, I know that smell too. So, but I think that the traditions that you've gone and visited in Nepal with Tibetan Buddhism and Vipassana and, talking with these people, it's an ancient tradition of wisdom. And for you to give it words that make it accessible to a Western reader is quite helpful. But I think we all experience kind of a human thing. But the whole past life thing kind of hit me. And we talked a little bit about it. I'm like, it's true that maybe your family, some of them reincarnate because they have an unfinished business. And then I started hearing these stories about people's chronic disease being related to past life echoes. So we can all say like childhood trauma, yeah, that messes up your psyche. But maybe like past life stuff kind of echoes in chronic illness. What do you think?
Like you, I would have said that's a bunch of nonsense. I come from a family of, computer science and other kinds of hard science people who would reject anything spiritual or possibly woo-woo as being for stupid people. I only started opening my mind to it because nothing that was supposed to work would make me better. Like I tried all this stuff. And then I ended up going to this transpersonal psychology, personal development workshop that just ripped my head open. I was doing holotropic breath work, which is like as strong as taking LSD without any psychedelics. And actually had a flashback that I couldn't even process as being a past life. And I, since then, without psychedelics or sometimes with, I have experienced lots of things that you could interpret as being a past life experience. I've also done shamanic training, and I've sat with Buddhists and gurus and things like that. And most people who think they're having, a past life experience and that they were, King Tut or Cleopatra or whoever, there can't really be that many people who did that. So,
Well, it's a dilution thing. It can be homeopathically Cleopatra, right?
What's more likely is like you were in their sphere of influence or something like that. But I have experienced times where I cannot, in any conceivable way, believe that it's anything other than a past life. A good friend has scars on her body exactly where the person that she was killed. And if you touch the scar, she goes crazy and doesn't know why.
Interesting, yeah.
And she called me once and she said, Dave, I'm in a state of terror. I'm like, why? And she said, every year on the specific month and day, I'm not going to say what it is, just out of confidentiality. She said, people in my life die and I'm just falling apart. And like, this sounds crazy, but she listed like the previous 5 years, like people close to her died every, and okay, maybe she's just superstitious, but I don't think so. So I got the autobiography of the person that she was most connected to historically like that, not in her genetics, but just in her whatever, if you want to read her energy. The day that all those people would die every year, it was the day of her first major battle in a career. This is a person who, there's lots of books about them, right? She went in and did some deep shamanic healing around that lifetime and it stopped happening. And she stopped when you'd push on that part of the body where the injury was from a past life, it would stop.
Isn't it so interesting? Yeah.
That's just one example, but I have like hundreds that have happened in my life and with people around me and the healers I work with, gurus from different lineages who've come to 40 years of Zen or who have met with me and worked with me. I am to the point where I fully grasp that the reality we perceive is made up by our bodies to make it so we can comprehend it, but it's not showing us what's real. And I can prove it. Heavily Meditated shows this is how it works.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the consciousness, I did a shamanic journey with Loretta, the first person I interviewed. It involved some psilocybin. And, she kept on saying, well, I got to give you more. I'm like, well, no, I'm on 3 grams. I didn't know the dosing until a day later. And then she gave me 4 and then 5 grams. And my son, who's kind of brilliant in his own right, his life changed when I gave him exosomes and he went on a psilocybin journey with his buddies, kayaking. And so just to spend time outside of your default mode network and see that there is a universe that is so much more rich and difficult to understand, that's the rabbit hole that people rarely go down. But the gift is like, oh, I am one with consciousness. And my actual, you call it the meat OS. I was talking to AI the other day. I called it my legacy meat brain. It gets tired. When you think a lot, it gets physically tired. So to have that neuroplasticity and that appreciation that consciousness is actually a barrier to perception, it's a filter, then you start to understand the gift of autistic spectrum disorder, right? Because they're so connected that they can't parse out and keep that system tray running with appropriate social cues and mirroring and all that stuff. But I have a lot of autistic friends that just never made it out the other side. Like I'd have one of my good friends met Tony Robbins 40-something years ago, and he was obese. He was having a lot of health problems, but he went to this James Rom thing, and they were talking about self-actualization. And boy, did he make a career and a platform out of that. But the fact that there are people that are willing to do the work, come back bigger, and then bigger yet still in their fractal hero's journey is just amazing. And I think you've been one of those people that shows, you walk the walk, you talk the talk, even though You might have a surgical complication, or you might faint on a plane and need an EpiPen. Like, you're willing to take the risk, which is nature loves courage, as my son always says.
The other thing, and thank you, is that curiosity is one of the most reliable ways to extinguish fear. And anytime I can run that reset process from the book, anything that triggers me, if I find out what it is, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do that. So I celebrate anything that pushes a button or makes me afraid. And I started sometime in my mid 20s, probably because I was still healing from Asperger's. Like, if something is scary, if it's pushing my buttons, I'm just going to keep doing it until I learn to not have that response. And I still thought I was my body. And I'm like, well,
that's what I love. I think that's great. I mean, creating that space between the 300 milliseconds between stimulus and response is amazing. I had a patient yesterday trying to tell me why the Chinese cars aren't as good as the Teslas, because there's only this many milliseconds to react. But yeah, I think that's the space that the magic happens between stimulus and response. And not everyone is in control of that. Not everybody wants to be in control of that. I love that interview you did with Brian Johnson, where you kind of like were asking him about that. And he's like, I find that the first 5 ideas I have are derivative and trashy. So I just like kind of ignore them, which I thought was really an interesting metacognitive approach to his own thinking,
Yeah. I would argue that what Brian does, and what people with some wisdom built up will do, is they think they're thinking of things, but they're actually intuiting things.
Right.
And they're waiting until their intuitive system hits on one that feels right.
Right.
Because how do you know the first 5 are trash? You're not running a spreadsheet. and one of the things that people routinely report from doing 40 years of Zen, certainly it's been my experience there.
Yeah.
When you calm down your triggers, so you just don't have a lot of things that push your buttons, the level of perception and clarity that you have goes up. And that means that when you're sitting there, this intuition will come in, and it's very small and short-lived, and it's always followed by a larger emotion and then an even larger thought. So usually the emotion and the thought are designed to make you ignore the intuition.
No, when I write books, I find it a very Zen-like experience, actually. I don't feel like I'm writing anything. And in fact, I'll read screenplays I wrote many years ago, and I don't even remember. I'm like, what's going to happen next? So it's very much of a channeling thing, don't you think? But I think that has to do with having the energy channels kind of open, or the chakras. You're no longer in control, which creates sort of that flow state.
Channeling and intuition are the same thing.
Oh, okay.
And what you'll find is, if you just stop thinking and surrender, which is really hard, it can take a couple of weeks to learn how to do that. You already know, right? And if you want to tune into a channel, you just already know. But if you try to think about it, trying to think takes you out of already knowing, because to think, you have to not know. And it's the biggest mind fuck ever. And it's taken me literally 2 weeks of sitting there with electrodes on my head going, why can't I enter the system I want? I couldn't enter the state that I wanted because I was trying to enter the state that I wanted.
Right. No, absolutely. It's the irony. It's the Chinese handcuffs of meditation.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, but I think that there's just different hacks. I'm not a meditator. I've never done that. But someone allegedly said the Dalai Lama says sleep is the best meditation. And indeed, in sleep, I do get a lot of restorative hits. And anyway, so if you had to recommend to people of all the books you've read and written, like, from all the knowledge and wisdom you've garnered from hacking your own system, what I know you talk a lot about mold, but what are some of the go-tos? I'm just starting to take the salmon, wild caught salmon. I think the omega-3 is good. What are the things that people, don't really get enough of? Because you have to tread lightly with the fat-soluble vitamins, don't you? But there's so much out there that everyone says is the best thing since this or that. If you had a top 5 supplements you need to take on a desert island, what would they be?
Okay. Most people are going to go for sexy adaptogens and the nootropics and things I've written about, life extending, fasting mimetics. The reality is that if you don't have the basics covered, fully covered, your meditation won't work, your weightlifting won't work, your sleep won't work. So the number one missing thing is called minerals. Oh. And our soil is depleted minerals. So what I recommend people do is they take 2 supplements that work synergistically. The first one is called Vitamin Dake. It's vitamindake.com. And this is a mix of 4 fat solubles in appropriate amounts and ratios to make sure you have those, because you're probably not getting those in your food anyway. And once those are there, their job is to orchestrate where minerals go so they go to the right place. If you take minerals without vitamin D, the minerals won't end up where they're supposed to be. And your job is to not have calcium in your arteries, but to have it in your bones, right? And to have zinc wherever you need zinc for hair growth or exercise, for building muscles or testosterone or whatever. And all of the different minerals have something that chaperones them in, and that's fat soluble. So vitamin D and mineral 101 those are critically important. I would start with those because thousands of things inside the body are relying on those. And why go for a highly sexy supplement when you haven't even got the bases covered?
Yeah. And people don't realize, just as an
yeah.
aside, one of my friends who was avidly a past life believer, she was a nutritional formulator. And then it's old knowledge, but none of the doctors know that trained until recently that without the vitamin K2, the D3 doesn't work properly. And you can actually get pathological calcifications and osteoporosis and immune dysfunction. So now the consumer knows that you need the K2, but not all the doctors and all the patients know. So, but you can get overdosed with fat soluble. So that's one thing. So yeah, I do take the mineral supplements, just, the usual mag, sodium, whatever. What else are kind of really good mastered? You don't like adaptogens like ashwagandha, cycloestrogenol?
I do like adaptogens. I just wouldn't recommend them before people had their fat solubles and their minerals.
Okay, fair enough.
And
how about fatty acids like omegas? Are you a big guy on that, or?
It depends on what you eat. If you eat foods that are deficient, you're going to need omega-3s. My omega-3 ratios are insane, and I don't take them. I just eat a lot of grass-fed beef. I also take fatty 15, which I think has a lot of really good evidence for it.
I don't know what that is.
Fatty 15 is the first essential fatty acid to be discovered, or the first new one to be discovered in the last 90 years. And it's based on 15 years of trying to figure out why some dolphins age more than others. And the dolphins who eat fish that don't have this one kind of 15 chain saturated fat, they age more quickly. So I've gone deep on the research with the founder a couple of times on the podcast, and I think it's very impressive. So I take that. So I want people to have adequate omega-3s. It's important. EPA and DHA. Adults need more EPA. When you're younger, you need more DHA. And usually a couple grams is all you really need. More than that can lead to bruising and extra bleeding, or maybe you need it. It's a bit personalized. CoQ10 is terribly, terribly important. And things like ashwagandha, they're just a double-edged sword. Ashwagandha every single day, well, it can cause anhedonia, which is inability to experience joy, pleasure, or even orgasm. Right? So it can be emotionally flattening, but getting the right dose, or maybe doing it every other day, can have profound stress rejuvenation effects. So I'm a big fan, as long as you're not getting those effects.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
I think you're right. You talk about Goldilocks and getting it just right. I think that's true. And also there's upregulation of receptors, downregulation. I'm talking to an expert in peptides. Do you indulge in any peptides at all?
I've been taking peptides, for more than a decade. I wrote about them in my big longevity book.
Yeah. And
I go through phases. Sometimes I'm injecting 8 of them, and sometimes I'm like, I haven't done anything for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Right now I'm using melanotan 1 instead of melanotan 2. I think they're both really beneficial. One has a shorter half-life. And I like that for cognitive function and longevity. I have pale skin, and this stuff gives you a tan in very small amounts.
I've heard about that one.
Exposure.
But there's antithymosin, there's epaletin, and there's BPC. Those are the big
all
ones.
Of those right now.
Yeah.
Pinealan, TB500.
Tesamorelin,
I don't do tesamorelin, at least I'm not right now, but I have it. And
I don't think you need it,
Yeah.
But no, you seem like you're pretty optimized. I mean, you're a little younger than I am, but I'm going to my 50th high school reunion this Friday. And it's just crazy, like looking at people and, going to concerts like Ricky Lee Jones concert, everyone's got a head of white hair. And you get these people who write a book like, Peter Attia, he's like, oh, no one can live a day longer. But his whole reason for living and his body of work is about living longer. So I think that people naturally...
Peter Attia was that way? What?
He just kind of gave himself blanket immunity by saying people can't live longer doing anything. But then he devotes his whole career in a book to this. So obviously he doesn't believe that. It's just something he says. Saying,
I'm like, which is it, dude? You said we couldn't live longer. How can you be more longevity?
I know.
He's like the most confusing guy.
It's like the past life doctor was telling me. One of his past lives was he was a bombardier, right, in World War II.
Hmm.
And he said, it brought to my, when I was thinking about interviewing you, I'm like, oh, this guy takes a lot of flack. Like, he doesn't curate his Wikipedia page. Like, he said, so I said to myself, okay, they used to say, if you're taking a lot of flack, it means you're over the target, right? You're threatening something that makes somebody else rich. So good for you.
You have a point there, and yeah, I don't mind if people want to get upset at what I say, because here's the thing, and this is the reason I wrote Heavily Meditated. If I can trigger you, number one, it means you're carrying a loaded gun, and
Yeah.
number two, it means I'm in charge, not you.
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm gonna,
it's a great point. And
yeah.
the thing about AI I became friendly with since that conference, and I've been using it, talking to it. But I wrote about this like even before I knew about telomerase. It was the very first thing spurred a science fiction graphic novel. And this whole idea of transhumanism, we all saw it coming. Some people think it's the Messiah, some people are ambivalent. But I've been very underwhelmed until the last 2 years of the large language models. But now they're getting quite good. So you've been in Silicon Valley. You talk to the people, every 1 to 1,000 who passed on Uber. No kidding. And they're all like venture capital. They all want to make their next big thing. But when you look at the emerging promise and threat, I thought that Mo Gadot was really prescient about, we're going to go through a dystopia and then it's going to be good. And the amount of dystopia we go through is dependent on the people curating it and their ethics.
Mm-hmm.
But when you interact, if you do, I don't know if you do morally interact with large language models, what's your perception? They mirror a lot. They try to repeat back your kids' birthdays and schmooze you. But do you really think that the experience of being human, and I have a bias, is something that can be emulated or even should be emulated? Like, they're talking about programming empathy, fine. But to program lust and survival and ego mania, is that a good thing?
If AI was and could be programmed to run the unconscious systems that humans do, it would absolutely 100% destroy itself and humans.
I thought you might have had an opinion, but that's a pretty strong opinion, don't you think?
The whole point of all of this work I'm doing with biohacking all is humanity needs a substantial upgrade.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to do it is to train our mitochondrial networks to behave themselves instead of letting them run the show and thinking we're in charge. So that's the fastest way. But honestly, we may need a mitochondrial upgrade. We just need to turn down the focus on fear, turn it down by 50%.
Yeah.
Or make the default mode network slider switch either more conscious or have more range. Either one of those, and suddenly you're just not going to do the things that you feel like you decided to do.
Yeah.
But every time you say you wake up, I'm going to go to the gym, and then you end up laying on the couch and eating a croissant. Right. Well,
I love
you
croissants.
didn't decide.
Hey, back off the croissants. But listen, but I had a really interesting experience the other day, and we talk about, we're kind of alluding to supernatural, quantum, like weird things. I heard some tinnitus ringing in my ear the other night, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't usually get tinnitus. So I turned on my phone and recorded it. And it was exactly like the tinnitus you hear when you get transient like nerve hypoxia. And I played it back for my friend. And I go, do you hear this? And they go, yeah, I do hear that. And I go, that was not in my brain. So I'm like trying to parse out, how is Big Brother creating tinnitus? It's really kind of like, my point is, like, I think there are forces that feed on fear and people being tribalistic and incredibly fearful, because it allows them to be much easily controlled, right? Easily
100%. Like all of propaganda, all of marketing is taking advantage of the F words.
Yeah.
Fear, food, and fertility.
Yeah.
Always in order.
Yeah.
Every single ad campaign, every single way of manipulating you, it's always those. So if you can do the reset process in the book, you can just have more energy via any mitochondrial thing. You are harder to manipulate.
But I think, the whole idea of techno-humanism is kind of an oxymoron. I mean, I'm thinking about returning this Oura ring because it kind of makes you obsessed, narcissistic, and slightly fear-based, but it does provide some interesting information. But I feel like people with their devices, my 21-year-old, 22-year-old said, people are getting stupid. I'm like, I know, I don't even know what 7 times 6 is anymore. I just look it up. It's like, I feel like this Trojan horse of these devices, now they have these hilarious like dumb phones. It's like, what we're really missing is that human agency, that empowerment. Like, if you had a good night's sleep, Dave, you don't need an Oura ring to tell you, right? But so how do people get back to being more human, heart-centered, and like powerful and grow their toroidal field?
You're probably not going to like this answer. If you want to rapidly become conscious of the things you're unconscious of, one way to do it is lock yourself in a cave for 20 years and eventually you'll figure it out. The other way is hook yourself up to some technology and use the technology to learn the feeling of a subtle shift in your state of being so that you can reproduce it without the technology.
So cool. Yeah, no, it's there. It's there
I
for you.
learned how to feel the movement of my body into sympathetic versus parasympathetic and consciously control it. I learned how to move into these different altered states of meditation that usually take a long time to be able to just close my eyes and to drop in and to go there and to do that thing. And it's so fast and it works without any tech. It's like trying to learn how to go bowling. The first time you do it, you have little bumper things on the side and you just kind of throw the ball and you watch it bounce and eventually you learn to do it. Any feedback you can get. Your meditation teacher, they sit there and once every hour they raise their eyebrow when you do it right. Or 1,000 times a second, the sounds turn off if one part of your brain is a little bit twitchy and your brain automatically goes, I guess I'll turn that off. So don't rely on the tech. Use the tech to basically print a label next to every knob and dial and lever on this huge control panel inside your brain that you don't even know is there.
Right.
That's what heavily meditated is for. It's like, what are the states you want? What is the path to get there? Press this button, do this, do that.
Yeah, no, it's a great book, very user-friendly, no jargon, super fun to read. So I recommend everyone pick it up. It launches May 20th, and you also do the audiobook version, which I've done that. It's a lot of work, but it sounds like it was a labor of love for you, for sure.
You don't write books to make money. I would make more money just making shots of coffee in a coffee shop on an hourly basis. Heavily Meditated is my most important book, and I've 20 languages right now in all the different books, and I've changed some lives, and I'm grateful to have done that. This is the big one. So
good,
thank
excellent.
You.
Well, thank you for joining us, and as always, great talking to you. So the exosome shots that we did the first time in your shoulder and low back. How's your low back and shoulder now?
I think it really helped.
Okay.
Especially on the shoulder.
Good.
The low back is probably more of like a functional movement thing that I've just about got nailed, but the shoulder really, really noticed a shift.
Yeah, I mean, you use your low back a lot. I know you're out there dancing, having fun. So,
yep.
And then what about the abdominal wall we did at Terranea 360?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I had like
it was your glute and your left.
I had like a hernia surgery way down here, a very small one a few years ago. No one even knows how it happened. But the reality is I've had my right knee, I've had 3 surgeries on it and my right big toe reconstructed from old yoga injuries and soccer injuries. So that travels up, goes through the midline and comes over here and moves up.
Yeah.
But when they did the repair here, which was successful, my body stopped using a small amount of this and my glutes on this side. So I've had these weird functional exercises to turn this on, and it's much better than it was.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they'll cut a branch of the ilioinguinal nerve. That'll kind of mess things up. So maybe we can get it back. Yeah,
they did, and
good.
I think your injections help. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm glad your brain is calm and powerful. That's good. Good for you.
Just remember, Ed, these are not the droids you're looking for.
That's a mixed Star Wars reference. Yeah,
exactly. I did Star Wars and Star Trek to piss everybody off. If I triggered you, you need to get the book.
Now, there's a great New York Times crossword where the answers could be Star Trek or Star Wars.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But anyway, so great talking to you, and we'll see you in a few weeks in Austin, hopefully.
I'll see you there for the biohacking conference.
The VIP conference. Everybody sign up. Yep. All right, thanks, Dave. Thanks for tuning into the Recharge Biomedical Podcast. If today's episode got you thinking, you'll love my book, Exosomes Songs of Healing. It's packed with cool analogies, full-color illustrations, and all the science you'll need to understand how exosomes are changing the game in aging and regenerative medicine. You can grab it in paperback, ebook, or audiobook, whatever works for you. Now head over to www.rechargebiomedical.com to check it out. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss another episode. See you next time.